candidate signs in the wrong location. And for me, there's been two negatives. One is obviously the financial implication. The second is every time a notice comes from the state and it says, you know, warning or advisory, I have to like tell my wife that it's okay, don't worry about it, you know, nobody's going to jail, we just got to pay another $15. So those are the two big impacts that I'm dealing with folks doing and not really paying attention to the rules. I'll start off with a quick comment. And Wayne talked about paying it forward, and I'm going to pander a little bit here because I'm in a room with rail splitters. You know, paying it forward, there's a statement that part of paying it forward is when great men step forward to plant trees that they will never have the opportunity to bask in the shade of, right? So you know, just think about that in the context of what we're doing. I'm trying to move forward, and maybe I don't change the country. Maybe my kids have an opportunity to see the country on a better front. But we all have a responsibility to try to do what's better, not just for us today, but take a longer term approach and really see things down the road. And I think we've taken a very myopic short-term approach to governing, and we've taken a very myopic approach to managing our finances, not only within the state, but within the country. I'm actually in the middle of reading the book about President Lincoln's administration, which is a phenomenal book, Team of Rivals. And if you get a chance, I highly recommend it. It's very insightful and informative. And you probably know he got the name as the rail splitter for splitting wood, going back to the tree reference. And it's interesting because President Lincoln grew up in very humble beginnings, but spent most of his life trying to better himself and trying to push himself to be all that he could be. He recognized he had intellect, he recognized he had capabilities, and he worked very hard to rise up through the ranks and become what he is. And you know, I'd like to think, and I'm obviously not President Lincoln, but I'd like to think that everyone in this room believes in that value system. That if you dedicate yourself, if you work hard, if you put the time aside to do the right things, you can achieve everything you want in this country. And I think our government, our state, our nation is trying to chip away at that. We're trying to kind of give and placate to those that maybe don't want to work hard. We've distorted our incentive systems where it doesn't necessarily make sense to work hard. And that really needs to change because, you know, my family, and I think I've told this story to some folks, didn't grow up with much. We lived in South Philadelphia when I was a child. My dad worked at a diner as a night shift manager. My mom was a cocktail waitress. But they went to schools on nights and weekends, and they made a better life for themselves, right? They had 2 kids, and they made that sacrifice. And we've forgotten how to sacrifice. We've forgotten how to give time to make ourselves better. So that was a really long introduction. Let me take a step back and tell you who I am, a little bit about me and what I'm doing. For those that don't know me, and I think I know a lot of the folks in the room, my name's Matt Lenzini. I'm running for the 15th District State Representative seat. If you're not familiar with that, it's the greater Bear area, and that runs down to Delaware City. The current holder of that seat is Miss Valerie Longhurst. If you don't know who Valerie is the House Majority Leader. And Valerie is, I would say, probably the most tax and spend happy legislator we have in Dover at the moment. I looked through her records recently, and she's voted yes on 20 of 22 tax increases. And I jokingly said the only 2 that she didn't approve or didn't vote for was the gas tax and a tax on alcohol. And I said, well, I don't know if there's some drinking and driving correlation in there. I don't want to insinuate anything. But those are the only 2 she has not voted for in her time down in Dover. I spent most of my teenage and adult years in the state of Delaware. I went to Kirk Middle School. I went to Glasgow High School. I've been through the public school system. I recognize that we need significant change in our public school system. I did not graduate with flying colors. My parents didn't have a lot of money. When I finished high school, I went right to work. And I've worked ever since. I did my undergraduate degree nights and weekends in community colleges. I did my grad school while working full-time, managing a team of 15 engineers. You know, this progression is not easy, right? But anybody can do it if you have some gumption and some fortitude and a little bit of grit in your system. You can do it. So, like I said, I've been working for 17 years. I currently work for Exelon now. I have 7 or 8 years of consulting experience and 9 or 10 years of management experience. Like I said, I started working when I was 18, so if I look young, that's kind of why the numbers make sense. I do a lot of work in the community. I'm vice chair of the Delaware Board of Trustees for the National MS Society, and the reason I'm involved with that is my mom has MS. She was diagnosed with that about 20 years ago, and she worked up until about 5 years ago until she was incapable of walking and was bound to a wheelchair. So, these are just some examples of some things that I've been involved with, and I keep going back to this idea of grit and sacrifice, and I think that's really, really important. And folks ask me all the time when I'm knocking on doors, when I'm talking to groups, why did you decide to run, right? I mean, you're doing well, you've got a good career, why would you do this to yourself? Right, and my wife asks me that question like every day. And it really came down to a couple very simple things. One, I don't think we have the best people in Dover, period. I just don't. I think most of our legislators are mediocre, they are not thoughtful, they are not insightful, and they are not well educated, and that needs to change. The best and the brightest should be representing us. This should be public service, and you should be doing it because you believe that you are capable of making things better, not because you're looking for an easy paycheck and a way out of working hard. And the second is, I really firmly believe that we are on an unsustainable path. We are on an unsustainable path at the state. We are on an unsustainable path nationally. Every year I look, and I'm a nerd, and I read all the journals and political magazines, and every year I look at what we're doing, and just within the state I find it's like we have an $80 million budget gap, we have a $130 million budget gap. We'll just go take some money from the Del Dot Transportation Trust Fund, and we'll move it over here, and then we'll go raise the gas tax, right? These are not sustainable policies. We are looking 6 months ahead instead of looking 5 and 10 and 20 years ahead. And that needs to be different. So I've really boiled my platform down into 3 very core areas. One is the economy. I think if you fix the economy, a lot of positive things can happen. And I was having a conversation earlier where we were talking about crime and drug abuse and kind of urban plight. And I think a lot of that is driven because people don't have a sense of hope. If you don't think tomorrow is going to be better, you will resort to whatever it is you need to do to get by. So if we fix the economy, we fix a lot of other problems. 2 is education. Our education system is an absolute mess. I don't care what anybody tells you, when we spend $19,000 per student in this state and our SAT scores are 51st, we're paying for a Mercedes and we're getting an old beat up Chevette from like 1982, right? It does not make sense. What we're doing does not make fundamental sense. And 3 goes back to my opening statement, is this idea of personal responsibility. Stepping up and taking responsibility for your future and for your financial abilities and for your family. And I think that is core to everything. I think everybody in this room believes in that fundamental idea. So I'll just make a few points on each one of those very quickly. When we talk about the economy, if you look over the past decade or so, the average household income in Delaware has dropped by about 20%. We've gone from an average household income of about $60,000 a year down to about $47,000 a year. Now that's been under this administration, this Democratic-led administration that we have. We tax too much. We create negative incentives for businesses. I think our gross receipts tax, quite frankly, I mean, if you couple it with the escheatment issues and abandoned property, our gross receipts tax may be the most broken thing in this state that we have. Penalizing businesses for doing B2B transactions within the state is just flat out dumb. Okay, why would you do business in this state if you go across the border and not get taxed for that transaction? It is bad business. We have lots of companies that are incorporated in Delaware, but they're not setting up shop here. And it doesn't really make sense, right? Outside of our tax structures and the fact that we're not pro-business, we're in the middle of New York, we're in the middle of DC, the financial epicenter and the political epicenter of the world. We should be a powerhouse. We have no reason not to be a powerhouse in this economy. Education. I mentioned that we're in the top 10 in spending. We're 51st with SAT scores. Our school systems are flat out inefficient. We have 19 school districts. It makes zero sense for us to have 19 school districts. The entire state of New York, excuse me, the entire city of New York, with 9 million people, is one school district. Now just think about that. With 19 school districts, you have 19 superintendents, you have 19 HR managers, you have 19 finance executives, you have 19 curriculum developers. It fundamentally does not compute, right? We have to get rid of that. Now the challenge is we have to deal with the DSEA and all of those issues of cutting back, but it is the right thing to do because the money should be going to the classroom. The money should be going to the students. The money should be working on allowing kids to learn the way they're capable of learning. Every child learns differently. Some are kinesthetic learners, they learn with their hands, some listen, some are visual, but we don't teach that way. We've kind of had this one-size-fits-all mentality, and that's not the way the world works. We all have different skills and we all have different abilities. So I think that our education system, we keep kind of putting Band-Aids on it. We did Race to the Top, we did Vision 2010, which is now Vision 2015, it's now, I don't know, Vision whatever it is now, and every 5 years it gets pushed out another 10. We're putting Band-Aids on a system that really, really needs reconstructive surgery. And until somebody steps up and says, look, we're basing our entire education system on fundamentals that were designed for the Industrial Revolution, and we're now in a technology age, that's going to take some leadership gumption. And it's going to take somebody that's not looking at politics as their career, they're looking at it as an opportunity to make things better. So kind of my last set of bullets, personal responsibility. I think when we give our rights away, when we create incentive structures that don't encourage people to work hard, to make sacrifices, to make intelligent decisions, we are teaching bad lessons. And that seems to be our MO. It's very easy to go to the polling place and vote yourself more stuff, right? And that's kind of what the Democratic Party has done. Come vote for me and you get more stuff, instead of saying, we can't give you more stuff forever. It's not sustainable. We just can't do it. We're running out of money. We're running out of options. We need to get back to core fundamental values. So that kind of brings me back to Mr. Rail Splitter, Abraham Lincoln, and he had a quote, and I'll probably botch it, but he said, "America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves." And I think the way we're voting and the incentives and the lack of leadership that we have, we are heading down that path of destroying ourselves. And I really, really don't want to see that happen. So I'll leave you with a final thought that, I am running against the House Majority Leader. This is a tough race. She has a fair amount of influence. I'll ask you to do a couple things. One, think about this. What better way to upset the system than to oust the House Majority Leader, right?
We like that.
So I ask you to do 3 things for me, and you don't have to do all 3.
But you can.
But you can. You can do all 3. Put on your sneakers and come out and help us knock on doors. Pick up your phone and make phone calls, and reach into your pocketbook, open up your checkbook, and write a check, because campaigns are expensive. So, I'll leave you with that. I hope that we are building a good nucleus here. I think friends like Sam, who I'm really getting tired of seeing, but he is a good friend of mine, and Tom, who left. We have good folks here, and I think you have people with the right mindset and the right attributes to make a difference. So, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. We're very well stated. That's our essentially the last formal speaker of tonight. Oh, we got it 50-50. I always forget. I'm sorry. And then I have a finishing spiel to make.